The Silent Bride. The stagecoach creaked like old bones as it rolled across the Wyoming plains. Dust swirled through the air, painting the late afternoon sky a muted gold. Inside the coach sat Evelyn Grace, a young woman whose eyes seemed older than her face. Her hands clutched a small wooden box, the only thing she had left of Missouri. Inside were a folded piece of music, a silver locket, and a letter from a man she had never met. A man who would soon become her husband. Evelyn hadn't spoken in 5 years. The fire that destroyed her home had taken her family and her voice. When she was pulled from the ashes, her throat was blistered, her lungs charred, and her spirit shattered. The doctors said she might never speak again, but the silence had become her shield. When a notice appeared in the local paper, "Widowed rancher seeks mail-order bride, honest and kind-hearted, age 20 to 30. Evelyn had written back in neat handwriting, "I cannot speak, but I can listen. I can work. I can keep a home." 2 weeks later, a reply came on coarse paper with the smell of hay and tobacco. "You won't have to say a word to be heard. Caleb Reed, Silver Ridge Ranch, Wyoming Territory." The stagecoach came to a stop before a wide, open ranch valley. A tall man stood waiting by the corral, broad-shouldered, sunburned, and solemn-eyed. He wore a clean shirt that had been mended at the sleeve, and a hat that shaded eyes the color of storm clouds. Caleb Reed didn't know what to expect. He'd buried his wife 3 years ago, the kindest woman the West had ever known. She died giving birth to their stillborn child. Since then, he'd lived alone with cattle and wind and memory. He didn't place the advertisement himself. His sister in Cheyenne had done it without asking. When Evelyn's letter came, her words, the simplicity, the honesty, had stirred something deep inside him. Now, seeing her step down from the stage, small and pale, with a scar running along her neck, he understood the silence she'd written about. He removed his hat and nodded gently. "Miss Grace." Evelyn met his gaze and nodded once. Caleb's voice softened. "Welcome to Silver Ridge, ma'am." Her lips curved faintly, trembling as if words wanted to form but couldn't. She extended her hand. He took it, rough, calloused fingers meeting delicate gloves. In that brief touch, there was more honesty than any words could carry. That evening, Evelyn explored her new home, a wooden ranch house standing lonely against miles of open land. There was a warmth inside, though it hadn't felt lived in for a long time. A framed picture of a woman on the mantel caught her eye. Caleb noticed her looking. "My late wife," he said quietly. "Mary." Evelyn lowered her head in respect. Caleb added softly, "You don't have to fill her place. Just be yourself." She looked up with teary eyes and nodded. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn learned the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn, baked bread, tended chickens, and mended clothes. Though she never spoke, she communicated with gestures, smiles, and the quiet grace of someone who had known pain and chosen gentleness instead. The ranch hands liked her. They called her Miss Evie, and said she brought calm even to the cattle. But Caleb, he felt something different. At first, he thought it was pity. Then, as days passed, he realized it was peace. Her silence filled the house not with emptiness, but with meaning. Sometimes he'd find her standing by the piano, her fingers brushing dust off the keys. He'd watch her touch them like an old friend. One evening, he asked softly, "You play?" She shook her head. Then she touched her throat, looked away, and tapped a single key. A clear, lonely note. Understanding dawned. "You used to sing," Caleb said. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded. He looked away, throat tightening. So did Mary. For a moment, both stood still, two people haunted by ghosts, yet drawn by the same unspoken ache. That night, long after Caleb went to the barn, Evelyn sat at the piano. Her fingers trembled, but she began to play, soft, hesitant, almost shy. A simple melody, like a lullaby. Caleb stopped his work when he heard it. He leaned against the doorway, letting the notes wash over him. For the first time in years, his ranch didn't feel empty. When she noticed him standing there, she startled, her hands freezing on the keys. "Don't stop," he said quietly. "Please don't stop." And she didn't. But as days turned to weeks, Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, figuratively and literally. One morning, Caleb received a letter. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Luke Hartwell, his late wife's brother. You took my sister's life and my family's land. I'm coming for what's mine. Caleb's jaw tightened. He folded the letter without a word. That evening, while Evelyn baked by the fire, he cleaned his revolver for the first time in months. She saw the motion and felt her chest tighten. Something dangerous was coming. Outside, thunder rolled over the valley, the song in the storm. The storm came with a vengeance. Wind howled through the pines. The sky turned black, split by lightning. Caleb had gone out to check the horses when he saw riders coming fast from the ridge. 5 men, rifles gleaming in the flashes of lightning. "Evelyn!" he shouted, running toward the house. "Get inside now." She appeared at the doorway, frightened, clutching the wooden box against her chest. "Cellar," he barked. She hesitated, her hands shaking. "Go." But before she could move, the sound of hooves thundered through the mud. Caleb turned just in time to see Luke Hartwell dismounting, rain dripping off his hat. His eyes burned with hatred. "You stole her from me." Luke spat. "You left her to die alone." Caleb stepped forward, soaked, bleeding from a cut on his arm. "Mary was my wife, Luke. I buried her with my own hands." "You buried your guilt," Luke snarled, drawing his gun. Gunfire split the air. Caleb fired back, ducking behind the wagon. Evelyn screamed silently, running to the window. She saw Caleb hit, his shoulder jerking as blood splattered across the rain. Her chest constricted. Her throat burned. For years, she had hidden her voice, buried it under grief and fear. But now, seeing him fall, something inside her broke open. She staggered toward the piano, her hands trembling over the keys. Caleb groaned outside, crawling toward his rifle, hearing thunder mix with gunfire and his own heartbeats. Then, suddenly, the noise changed. Through the rain came a sound. Soft, cracked, human. A voice. Evelyn's voice. At first it was only a hum, hoarse, uncertain, but it grew. The melody rose through the storm like a prayer reborn. Her voice trembled, broke, then soared higher. The same melody she'd once written in Missouri, the one she played for her lost family. Her song pierced through the wind and rain. Luke froze, gun half raised, eyes wide. The men beside him shifted nervously. "What the hell?" one muttered. Caleb, bleeding, looked up through the mud and rain, his heart stopping for a moment. Evelyn stood in the doorway, hair whipping around her face, voice trembling like light in darkness. And for the first time, he heard her. Her song carried not just music, but grief, hope, love, and fury all at once. The storm seemed to bend around it. The horses reared, snorting in fear. Caleb seized the moment. He fired once. Luke's gun flew from his hand. Another shot cracked. One outlaw fell. The rest, spooked by the eerie voice echoing through thunder, turned and galloped into the night. Luke stared at Caleb, then at Evelyn, pale and ghost-like against the lightning. His eyes filled with something almost like shame before he fled. The silence that followed was broken only by the rain. Evelyn stumbled forward, falling to her knees beside Caleb. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice barely there. He blinked up at her in disbelief. You spoke." Her tears mixed with the rain. "I sang," she said hoarsely, voice cracking. Caleb's chest shook with a broken laugh. "You sure did." He pulled her close, his head resting against her shoulder as they sat in the mud, the storm easing around them. And as thunder faded, she began to hum again, softly this time, a lullaby of peace. Weeks passed. The sun returned. The valley turned green again. Evelyn's voice, though fragile, grew stronger each day. She spoke few words, but every one mattered. Caleb's wound healed. The men who attacked never returned. Luke was found weeks later, half-starved, wandering north, murmuring about the ghost woman who sang in the storm. The town began calling her the songbird of Silver Ridge. But to Caleb, she was simply Evelyn, the woman who had brought music back to a house that had forgotten how to live. One golden evening, as the sun melted over the horizon, Caleb sat on the porch while Evelyn played the piano. The melody drifted through the air, calm, clear, alive. He stood behind her and said softly, "You know, I never told you why I married again." She looked up at him with curious eyes. "I thought I was saving you," he said, smiling faintly. "Turns out you were saving me." She reached up, touching his cheek with trembling fingers. Then, in a whisper barely louder than wind, she said, "We saved each other." Caleb's eyes softened. "Guess we did." Outside, the valley was quiet, except for the distant sound of cattle and the gentle hum of her song. The woman who couldn't speak had found her voice again, and in doing so, she gave a lonely rancher back his heart.